Hi, I'm Anna Marie Cox, and welcome to With Friends Like These, a podcast about difficult conversations and relationships and politics and relationships and the way those things influence each other. It's a particularly special episode today. First of all, there's some stunt casting involved, a special crossover episode, like, when Buffy would be on Angel or Angel would be on Buffy. I am doing this show today with my friend John Moe, who's the host of the Hilarious World of Depression podcast, which explores the world of depression through the lens of comedy. It's actually really great. And if you have an interest in either comedy or mental health issues, you should check it out. And the other thing that's particularly special about this episode of With Friends Like These is that we couldn't decide if we had two hosts or two guests, or maybe we had two hosts and two guests. But basically, we interview each other, and we talk about depression. We actually talk about suicide, too. And if that's something that upsets you particularly, you might want to skip this episode. If you feel like you can hang in there, please do. It's not just a special episode in some ways. It's a pretty important episode. Thanks for listening.
I guess we should introduce ourselves. Should we introduce each other here?
Let's introduce ourselves, because I feel like I always feel awkward introducing other people.
Yeah, it feels a little like The Tonight Show.
Yeah.
I'm John Moe. I'm the host of the Hilarious World of Depression.
And I am Anna Marie Cox, and I am the host of With Friends Like These.
It is a two-host, no guest, or two-host double guest.
I think it's two host double guest.
Two host.
I like to think in forms of multipliers.
Hosts and guests squared.
It's host and guest squared.
Now, for listeners of my show, can you fill us in a little bit on what your show's all about?
Sure. It is ostensibly sort of about politics. It's with the Crooked Media Network, which is the Pod Save America, Pod Save the World, Pod Save Us All. I think the only non-pod titled
Pod
show.
Bless the Queen.
Pod Bless the Queen.
Yeah.
And it's about the long version. It's about relationships and politics and relationships. How our politics have an impact on our relationships, and the other way around. And it's also about having conversations that you maybe have avoided or you didn't realize you had to have.
Mm-hmm.
I've had conversations with people in the disability rights community about just being disabled, which is something that a lot of able people don't kind of realize. They think you're not supposed to point it out,
right.
Right. Like you're not supposed to actually talk about the disabled people.
If you don't talk about their disability, maybe they'll forget that they have
exactly.
it.
Exactly. It's really more like maybe I get to forget that they have it, right?
Right.
I talked with my good friend Ira Madison III about being my black friend and being kind of the black friend in a lot of relationships, yes. Like what that's like.
I love that episode.
Yeah, he's hilarious. And we talk about politics too. I have a sort of reoccurring guest, Rick Wilson, who's a diehard, never Trumper. But for the most part, the guys at Pod Save America don't like it when I say it's a show about awkward conversations, because they think people don't want to listen in on awkward conversations.
Right.
But it's a show about awkward conversations.
It's a show about de-awkwardizing a lot of those conversations.
Yeah, and being aware of them, being aware of what the awkwardness is, and going ahead and kind of diving through it. Because one of the things that we talked about, when I talked to Ira, was discomfort as a tool of oppression, meaning, I think a lot of white, able, cis people who are not, in part of very many vulnerable groups really hate being made aware of other people's discomfort and hate being uncomfortable themselves.
Right.
Would prefer to live life in comfort.
Yeah, comfort's awesome.
Comfort, their comfort zone, and so in a way, like your comfort, if you stay in a comfort zone, like that's a tool of oppression, and you need to, in order, if you want to, be down with the woke folk,
You got to get a little uncomfortable.
Got to get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, my show, The Hilarious World of Depression.
Yes, please. And for my listeners, please.
Yes. Produced by American Public Media here in St. Paul, Minnesota, is a discussion about clinical depression, or Clini-D, as we sometimes nickname it on the show. Told through the lens of comedy and comedians. It's a topic that I think needs to be talked about a lot more, given how pervasive it is and how silent it often is. And so I got in touch with a bunch of my friends from the comedy world who deal with clinical depression, and we talk about it. We talk about what's funny about it, what's human about it. And the idea is that you're more likely to want to hear about it from Maria Bamford than from a medical expert. And so it's a little bit of sugarcoating to let the pill go down.
There is a remarkable overlap, of course, in those communities.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the comedy and depression community.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of what
I'm
started
wondering,
the
are there
whole thing.
comedians that don't get depressed?
There's a few. I found a few who I tried to book.
You should try. I was going to say you should interview them.
Yeah, and I tried to book them, and they're like, "Oh, I'd love to be on your show. I'm not actually depressed."
What's that like, though?
Right. But there's been big disagreement too about whether whether that job attracts depressed people or turns them into depressed people. Mm-hmm. And some people say, well, no, it's just there's as many depressed people in comedy as there are among postmen, but your postman doesn't go on stage and talk about suicidal ideation. Your dentist...
It doesn't come up in their line of work.
Right.
Like when they give you the mail, they're not like, oh, by the way.
By the way, I thought about killing myself this morning. Yeah, your dentist isn't talking about despair. And if so, you wouldn't go to that dentist.
Right.
But then a lot of people say, too, that it's sort of this perspective on life that you might gain through depression, where you can... you've looked at the void before, and a lot of people have looked at it even if they aren't willing to say it. So if you make a joke about the void and the meaninglessness and the despair, that's going to get a laugh because people recognize that from the secret parts of their own brain that they haven't wanted to recognize,
right,
so to speak.
There's the same kind of debate about alcoholics and addicts in creative professions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, part of me, I wants to think that the statistics are statistics and we're not that special,
Right.
And there are, probably your postman. Now I'm thinking about this poor drug addicted, depressed postman out there, the poor guy. You deserve help.
Yeah.
But alcoholics and addicts are some of the funniest people I've ever met, some of the smartest people I've ever met. You go to a 12-step meeting and you will laugh. I promise you.
Yeah.
In fact, like I've told my stories, about my recovery in non-12-step context, whether for, trying to be of service in other ways, like letting, I think of them either civilians or earthlings. Sometimes they're called normies. We know what my story has been like. And I have some lines in my story that I think are hilarious, and they do not go over well.
They don't play.
They do not play with the people who haven't been through it. They think there are jokes about my depression, jokes about my bottom out,
Do you have any that you remember offhand, or are they all contextual?
Oh, they're all super contextual.
Okay.
Except just describing like my time in the psych ward, which I've spoken to you about before.
Yeah, yeah. I want to get to that. And sort of the genesis of our conversation here is we've known each other for a while, and we got to talking about our shows, and we realized that on the Venn diagram, there's a big, big overlap.
Well, but in our specific interest and Venn diagram with us, and I'm gonna, my show is about awkward conversations, about talking about the stuff you don't talk about, and I know there's something that you don't talk about.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah. So I have talked briefly on my show about my own depression, and this is something I've been dealing with since junior high school, at least, and only not diagnosed until I was, I think, around 30, maybe even a little bit past 30. And so I've been on a mission in that sense, but the event that has sort of driven my fervor along these lines was the death of my brother by suicide. My brother Rick died in April of 2007, and he had been a drug addict for many years. I mean, I guess once a drug addict, always a drug addict. That's the language, right?
Well, inactive.
Yes. He was an inactive drug addict, as far as we know. For several years leading up to his death, he volunteered on a sobriety hotline, and he was evidently clean. And I keep putting those qualifiers in there of as far as we know and as evidently, because his form of addiction, when he was using, he was full of lies. He was just an incredibly charismatic guy. Everybody who came into contact with him wanted to be around him some more. And he was able to use that to get all the drugs and money and shelter and services that he needed. He was very, very good at it. And so he went through some sort of university clinical trial treatment thing, we are told, again with the qualifiers, and seemed to sober up. But he had used some hard stuff. He'd used a lot of methamphetamine. And when at the point he died, he had been depressed for some time, according to people who knew him. He lived in San Diego. I lived in Seattle when it happened. And he had confided in them a little bit about what was going on. He had gotten his ex-girlfriend pregnant, and he was at the age of, I think, 45, about to be a father for the first time, and was really terrified of that. He told me several months before he died, he told me Christmas, the Christmas before, and it was really remarkable because I thought, he's telling me about being terrified of being a parent, and everybody I know who's had kids has been terrified of being a parent. You'd be crazy not to be. But there wasn't the excitement that goes along with it. The sort of, I'm going to have a new best friend.
I have reproduced.
Yes. I've fulfilled my biological imperative, and I've reproduced. But I didn't think much of it, and I didn't even know he was depressed. And from what I have gathered, which isn't much from his life down there, he received a recommendation from a doctor that he get to inpatient treatment, that this is very serious, what he's facing. And he didn't want to do that, and he was ashamed of that. He was ashamed of his mental illness, and he was terrified that he had reproduced, and he went to a gun range in San Diego, signed up for a membership a couple weeks before, had never been there as a member, showed up, bought one box of bullets that he never opened. He went into the gun range, bought a box of bullets, went out to the range, and shot himself with a bullet that he had been carrying around in his pocket. When I got the call that he had shot himself, my wife called me, and I said, I just remember the most calm I think I'd ever been. I just said, "Oh, is he dead?" And she said, "I don't think so, but you need to get down there. You need to go to the airport right now and get to San Diego." And I found out that it was at a gun range. My first book had come out a few months before that in October of 2006. And one of the chapters in it, I go to a gun range, and I talk about how I had to go there with a friend because the gun range wouldn't allow someone who wasn't a member to go there by themselves. And my brother had read my book, and so he had joined this gun range and then killed himself there. So that's a burden of responsibility I've been carrying around for a while, over 10 years now, and so I got the call to that this had happened. I flew down there with my mom and my sister, and we got there to the emergency room just before he died, and then he died once we were there. So at the service, we had a service down there and a service up in Seattle, and I thought, well, this sucks. And it sucks that I didn't know that this was happening. It sucks that he felt a need to do this. And it was the illness that did, I told my son was in kindergarten at the time. I said, well, your uncle had a brain disease that we didn't know about, and it killed him, because I wanted to protect my 5-year-old, but I also wanted to tell the truth.
That is the truth.
It is the truth. And I thought there's got to be, people need to talk about this more. And I've been trying to talk about it in any venue I could find ever since. And this has been probably the loudest I've been able to talk about it, is this podcast.
Right. And so as someone who's my part of this conversation is that I'm a survivor of a suicide attempt, actually a couple.
Yeah.
Which I don't keep a secret, but I don't really talk about in this public venue. So hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Tell me about the tattoo on your arm.
Oh, yes, that is one of the ways that I've decided to be public about it.
Yeah.
I think
it's a very poetic way.
Well, so I started getting tattoos after I got sober. And they all have kind of stories about them. And the second one I got was actually a pen. It's a fountain pen. It's on my forearm. It's sort of in honor of my father, who collects fountain pens. Also, I'm a writer. It's a little literal.
Right.
But last year,
and writers are always losing their pens.
I know.
You've got
this
one
is like
right
the
there.
only fountain pen I've never lost.
There you go.
But then last year, I added a little something. I added a semicolon at the end of the pen, as though the pen had written it. And the semicolon is a unofficial symbol of survivorship. Survivorship of, I think some people use it as general mental illness, but it started pretty specifically as
people who have attempted
suicide. And what it means is that you kept going. Like, you could have stopped, but you kept going.
Right.
Writers usually especially appreciate the sentiment there.
Yes.
And I did. And so I have it on my arm. When people ask about it, I do tell them. I'm really open about being in recovery from my other disease, right? Mm-hmm. My addiction. It is tougher. I've become more open about being bipolar. So this is like this is the reveal on top of reveal.
Yeah.
Although it's funny, like if you look at the Venn diagram for people who have bipolar disorder, people who are addicts, alcoholics, and people who have tried to commit suicide, like that's statistically, you could have guessed.
Right.
It would have been a pretty safe guess. People who have
you were bipolar?
That I would attempt suicide. I would have attempted suicide.
Yeah.
Just because I read one statistic that it's something like 45% of those with substance abuse disorder have attempted suicide at one point or another. I know the statistic a little more firmly that 6 times people with substance abuse disorders are 6 times more likely to attempt suicide. People with co-occurring disorder, meaning substance abuse and some other mental illness, have like a 30% suicide, like 30% more likely to have suicidal ideations. Those 3 things, like I hit the jackpot,
Yeah.
And I always, I was listening to your story, which of course is heartbreaking. But one of the reasons I want to be out is to be of service, not to just people who I think should be talking about their own. Again, we have to talk about our language. The struggle, is it a struggle? Challenges?
Yeah. I try to avoid the word fight because depressives, would rather sit around in their sweats than fight.
Yeah, we have to come up with better language. But, I definitely want to be out about it because I think that stigma does prevent people from seeking help. Mm-hmm. But also I want to be out because I feel like I have a message for survivors, the families, or the people whose families have gone through this, a successful suicide attempt in the family, which is that, and I know you must have heard this, but there's nothing you could have done.
Yeah. Yeah.
There really isn't.
Yes.
I hope that helps to hear it from me.
No, it does. It does. I mean, it does help to hear it 1,000 times. And I can convince myself of that plenty of times, but it's, these things are complicated and they recur.
Because in the end, it is sort of like an addiction in the sense that it is an illness, yes, but it ultimately resides within the person.
Yes.
And much as with I'm sure a lot of people who have friends and loved ones who are in the grip of addiction know that if that person wants to use, there is nothing that's going to stand in their way.
Right.
Nothing.
Because they're not driving the ship at that point.
Right. And I feel like suicide is similar, but it's different in the sense that you can put up better roadblocks for people. You can institute waiting periods for guns.
Right.
You can make it harder. And I think every time you make it a little bit harder, I mean, that does some good.
Well, that's the idea behind the guardrails on the bridges. Yeah. Just make it harder, get through that moment.
Mm-hmm. Because it's true also, I read somewhere that most suicide ideations last less than a minute. Mm-hmm. If you can get through that minute, you have a chance of getting better.
Right. I mean, which is sort of the language of addiction too. Yep. Today I'm not going to drink.
Right.
And I want to hear, if you'd like to share it, if you're willing to share it, kind of what led up to your attempts and what was going on, in your brain. Like, let's get to that relatable moment. And I know for your show we need to drop in a break.
Right. We'll drop in a break right here.
All right. Break time.
You're listening to With Friends Like These with Anna Marie Cox.
Are you hiring? Do you know where to post your job to find the best candidates? Posting your job in one place isn't enough to find quality candidates. If you want to find the perfect hire, you need to post your job on all the top job sites. And now you can. With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post your job to 100 plus job sites, including social media networks like Facebook and Twitter, all with a single click. Find candidates in any city or industry nationwide. Just post once and watch qualified candidates roll into ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use interface. No juggling emails or calls to your office. Quickly screen candidates, rate them, and hire the right person fast. And I'm probably a bad person, but you know what? I'm sort of hoping that there's some former Republican congressman that might be, on ZipRecruiter in a year and a half. Find out why ZipRecruiter has been used by Fortune 100 companies and thousands of small and medium-sized businesses. And right now, my listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free by going to ZipRecruiter.com/friends. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/friends. One more time to try it for free. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/friends. Give a former Republican congressman a job. They might not do as much damage for you as they've done to us. Now we're back.
Now we're
magic
back.
Of radio. We're actually just we never went away. But
no, we were just sitting here.
Yeah.
So we were talking about your semicolon and your bipolar and your addiction and the circumstances that led up to your attempt to deal with it in the wrong way.
Yes, the permanent solution to a temporary problem, as people often say. So for me, it really is tied up with my mental illness and my addiction. I think I would have defied odds had I not attempted suicide. But I was in the depths of both. I was an untreated manic depressive. I'm bipolar 2, which tends to have lower highs and lower lows.
That's the Catherine Zeta-Jones, Demi Lovato bipolar.
Well, a sexy bipolar, isn't
yes.
it? And the highs are not as manic as sort of what you think of the Homeland bipolar, Claire Danes bipolar. Not the actress herself, but
the character.
But the lows are you are just frozen and immobilized and in that darkest depth. And of course, I was using depressants, which just make it worse. Yeah. Alcohol and also benzos, both of which are and also I was courting death just by mixing those two things.
What are benzos?
Benzodiazepines. Xanax is the most popular one. That's what I was doing. I had a prescription. That
means it's healthy.
It's good for you. And my marriage was in trouble. And I felt, and my consequences, as we say, were adding up. My legal consequences, my work consequences. I'd been arrested for DUI. My work was really, starting to suffer. becoming kind of erratic, more than just typical freelance writer erratic, like really erratic in my work.
It's good with a writer and journalist to know that you can count on them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of the whole thing.
Exactly. Although we're also notoriously erratic, but there's I was outside the boundaries. Like editors had no idea what they were going to get, you know? So my overall feeling in that period was just of guilt, crushing guilt.
That you would let somebody down, let yourself down?
Everyone down, and that I was a burden, and that I was never going to get better, and that and this profound loneliness too.
Because nobody understood what you were going through.
But then I felt stupid for thinking that. You know, I'm smart enough to know that like other people go through this. I've read the books. You know, I knew what my diagnosis was, right?
Sure.
But I just, I would say loneliness and guilt were the things that weighed down on me. And actually, like even telling you this right now, I can feel it the way that I felt it then, which is like this feeling in your chest of weight, like a metal band around my chest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know it's there, but that doesn't make it any more comfortable.
Right, and you know, drinking and using helped. I mean,
relieve the symptoms.
And you know, I just basically came to a point where I thought the only solution was to just not exist. That I was never going to get better. I was never going to be anything but a burden. I was never going to escape this crushing guilt. And everyone would be better off, including myself, if I ceased to exist.
Did you think that there would be relief for you that followed that? Because this is sort of the conundrum of suicide, right?
Right.
That there is no you to feel better, as Dick Cavett said.
Yeah. And this is where maybe sort of the fog of using comes in, because it wasn't, most addicts and alcoholics aren't thinking about consequences in general. So I think that in a weird way, like I was being just as short-sighted with my thoughts of suicide as I was with, you know, drunk driving. Like I wasn't thinking about what would happen next.
Right. If you had been, you wouldn't be doing those things in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. I was just thinking it's sort of, I often compare it to like, it's just like being in extreme pain of any kind. Like you just want relief from your pain. Mm-hmm. And you don't think about what's going to happen after you get that relief. Like the feeling of pain is so overwhelming. It's so present. You can't think straight. Right. You know? And so you don't make you're not making good decisions. And so, you know, that I took what I had. I just gotten a fresh prescription. And then I was just really lucky. I made it. And I woke up in the ER.
Wait, describe the circumstances. I'm so glad you made it. Describe the circumstances that you were in. Like, where were you? What was going on when you took them? And what did you take?
Well, I don't want to get into too much detail.
Okay. Yeah, let's not get into what you took, because we don't want to give people any details.
And I don't want to get let's see. So I was actually on a business trip, which is sort of embarrassing too, but like that's my, you know.
Travel's a total trigger though.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Because it's for a lot of people, both depressives and for people with substance abuse orders, because you're away. So there's kind of this feeling of like, oh, I can get away with it, or it's a special occasion or whatever. So it was at the end of a day that I had, you know, I'd sort of been good, quote unquote good, but then had relapsed and was being called on it. And I just made this decision of, you know, not thinking about what it would do to the people in my life, not thinking about my husband at the time, not thinking about my family, my mother, my father. That's another thing that's really short-sighted. It's incredibly I feel like I can say this. It's an incredibly selfish thing to do. Like committing suicide is really fucking selfish.
Right. But the disease, the addiction or the depression or whatever it is blinding you to that.
Right. So I wasn't thinking about anyone or anything else. I was just thinking about my pain. And so I took I had this brand new Xanax prescription. I was already pretty bloated on booze, and I just swallowed everything. And I was lucky, my ex-husband found me before things got too bad, and I don't remember anything really, except waking up.
You didn't expect to wake up.
I didn't expect to wake up. I was so pissed.
Really?
Yeah.
You weren't like, oh, another chance at life?
No. Well, I'm pissed. I was kind of like, I felt defeated. Defeated is probably the better word. I felt like, I think my exact sort of thought was, oh, fuck. Fine. I guess. All right, fine.
Another obstacle.
Yeah. Well, no, it was the sense of surrender, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Higher
power.
Higher power. I did have a moment of I wasn't thinking in terms of higher power. I'd been to AA or whatever, but I wasn't really thinking about recovery. But I just remember thinking, okay, fine. You win this round. I'll give it another shot, meaning I'll give, life another shot.
Yeah.
Because I did have this really overwhelming feeling of, well, that there must be some other plan for me.
Were you religious before?
I was not religious, and it's hard to talk about it because it was just this real sense, and I don't want to make it mystical or anything, but it was more again, I wasn't even thinking in terms of a God or a higher power, but I was thinking, all right, fine. I was surrendering to something when I said, all right, fine. Mm-hmm. I'll give it a shot. Mm-hmm. It was some sense of okay, well, that didn't work, and I am out of ideas. Mm-hmm. I am just done. Because that played my last card.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. So I guess I'm just, to use the, cards metaphor, I'm just sitting there. I'm just gonna, whatever cards come my way.
Yeah. What's the Dorothy Parker line? Poison tastes awful, might as well live.
Yeah. I mean, it was sort of a might as well live situation. And I was in this place of just complete befuddlement and surrender. And so I started to basically do most of what people suggested. What the very first thing was, which is unavoidable, was not a suggestion. It was a very, very firm requirement by the state that I go to a psych ward for a while.
Involuntary committal.
Involuntary commitment. Yay.
Now, from what I've heard, and I've talked to a few people on my show who've gone through this, Maria Bamford talks about this on her brand new Netflix special, that if you're looking to go somewhere to get healed, no. You're just going into basically a tank where they take away your phone and you have to watch really bad TV with people who might even be worse off than you.
Right. Oh, this was a definitely worse off than me situation. I had been committed before, voluntarily committed to a psych ward where it was very posh. It was a private hospital, and you got to keep your own clothes and order off a menu and have your phone. And it was a little just kind of a spa. It was, a kind of a downscale spa, maybe.
Right. The public university of spas.
Right. This was a public hospital that I went to, and I say this with love and respect, but it had actual crazy people, people who were manifesting their symptoms, not just rich people who were trying to deal. This were people, schizophrenics, psychotics,
yeah.
And thank God for them, man. Because I belong there. It was this breakthrough for me. It was fine. It was being you know what? I can't fool myself any longer. I'm crazy too. When I say they're real crazy people, this word, I was one of them. I went crazy.
That's why you were there.
I was there because I was crazy. I was there because I could not be trusted. We took away all the sharp objects and the shoelaces and belts, and we had to eat everything with spoons.
And that must have been...
And only color with crayons. We actually, the adult coloring book craze, that happened, I laughed so hard when it sort of started because they had coloring books when I was in the psych ward.
Yeah.
And we had to color with crayons because we weren't trusted with other...
Yeah, you're back in kindergarten.
And I remember complimenting the aide that had them, like he sort of ran the coloring book hour.
Your dealer, your hookup with the crayons.
Yeah, with the crayons. Because they were like fairly like there wasn't a lot of Frozen. They were like, Mandelas and like unicorns and stuff. And he was talking about how hard it was to find non-children
you don't
oriented
want Dora the Explorer.
Coloring books. And I'm like, when the adult coloring book craze happened, I was like, wow, his life is easier. Thank God for that.
He's finally caught a break.
He's got a break. He doesn't have to like go searching through deviant art forums.
To print something up on his little HP printer.
He can buy whole books. Like, good for him. Like, his life is easier now.
Was there a marker that you had to hit in order to get out of there, or one that you were aware of?
It was a time period. It was just a time period.
Oh, okay. You had to do time.
I had to do time, but it was. I'm so glad it happened. Not only did there was someone brought an AA meeting to that psych ward, and I don't remember anything about the meeting except just thinking the two people that brought it had, part of their story, they said that they'd been in psych wards themselves and they seemed to be having decent lives. Mm-hmm. And I had that grasping thought that a lot of people have, which is that, okay, all right, they did it, so it's possible. All right, maybe me, okay, all right.
Had you owned up to being an addict at that point?
I knew, yeah.
But had you said it out loud?
I'd said it. I'd been to meetings, but you hear a lot from people with substance abuse disorders, like terminal uniqueness, and by that they mean terminal as in a disease. Like it's a deadly form of uniqueness, and that's what people often have. And I felt like I had that. I definitely had thought I was like, well, it wouldn't work for me, like. That it works for you guys, but not me. But having this kind of bottom made me, and seeing other people who had been through it made me think, all right, it could work for me.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happened at that meeting was everyone had to go to everything because there weren't enough people to, have separate groups. So like you had the actual crazy people at the AA meeting too. And I now feel like I shouldn't talk too much about it, but let's just say like there are some really interesting shares. Because
some colorful stories that may or may not be rooted in reality as we know it.
Yeah. And there were two other gentlemen there that were lucid, who identified as alcoholics. I remember like bonding with them, and they were both there as guests of the state, both Black guys. And actually, I remember having a moment with them where they asked me what I was going to be doing after I got out. And I was like, oh, well, they want me to go to treatment. And they both were like, oh, man, that's awesome. And I was like,
you got a ticket.
I was like, oh, right. Like, that is awesome. I do get to go to treatment,
Because you're a white lady?
Because I'm a white lady with insurance and, resources. Yeah. And they were, one guy was going to sign up for a study, a research study, in order to get treatment, and the other guy just didn't know what was going to happen.
Wow.
And then the other really amazing thing that happened while I was there was there was this woman who I think was probably schizophrenic. Mm-hmm. She had a very loose relationship, which went to the reality when we would be in group to talk. Like her shares were off, would kind of go off into very into fantasy. Mm-hmm. And she was a couple of things. I remember she was actually really beautiful. She was sort of older. She looked like the lead singer of, I think said this, like Kim Gordon. She looked like Kim
Sonic
Gordon.
Youth.
Sonic Youth, yeah. And she was trying to share at a group session once, and she was so frustrated. I remember she got this look on her face, like when you're trying to remember a word, or something. But what she said was, "I can't make my words match my mind."
Wow, those are some words to live by.
And I just was like, same,
That's sort of the whole.
Same.
That's sort of the whole thing. Like, if you break your leg, there's all sorts of terminology for exactly what the problem is. If there's a vertebra problem, you can identify which vertebrae. You can't do that with mental illness.
I think about that woman a lot, actually. I hope she's...
Can't make your words match your brain.
Yeah.
Match your mind. Mind?
Mind, brain.
Mind,
This is the idea that, like, again, it's just what I want to tell you is inexpressible.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to tell you is impossible to express.
Must have been heavy for you as a writer too, because your whole job is to express those things with words.
Yeah. I mean, I can try. I mean, I think we're doing an okay job talking about it right now, but
Yeah.
I think that anyone who's been through it, any kind of mental illness, understands that it's ultimately very lonely feeling. That's one of the reasons why it feels so lonely, is because the feelings do not translate very well at all, even for writer, the best writers in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I've been dealing with this, like I said, for a very long time, and I've reached several sort of resigned points where I'm like, well, screw it. This isn't going to get cured. This is going to be good at sometimes and bad at other times, but I'm just weird. Like that's always the term that's been in my head. It's like, I know I'm not processing things like I think other people are. I'm not responding to situations like other people do. Sometimes I am, but often not. And screw it. I'm just weird. I'm just going to be weird forever. And it took, someone diagnosing me, no, you have a chemical thing. You have a disease called depression. Here are ways we can treat it. That has led me to start thinking of it in other terms, or attempt to. I don't always succeed. I still think I'm awfully weird.
I think weird's a good word. I also think diagnoses are incredibly freeing, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I think some people see being diagnosed with a mental illness, whether it's addiction or depression or bipolar, as a sentence of some kind, as a limiting thing.
Right.
Like, I had the experience, because it happened for me when I was in treatment, of it being very freeing sense, because I was like, oh, so that's what's wrong with me.
Yeah, you are understood.
Like, it's sort of go back to like feeling like you can't express stuff. It's like being told like, oh, that's a broken leg. Okay. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know, and we'd have some things that we can do.
Yeah, I've dealt with 3 broken legs this week in this office.
Right. And here's my plan to help heal you. And it works sometimes. I mean, it's unlike other illnesses, physical illnesses, because it's a lot of guesswork still.
Yeah.
But both being diagnosed as an addict and also being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which another word we talked about earlier, disorder is a weird word, but being bipolar.
You're a bipolar American.
I'm a bipolar American. That's right. It was like, woohoo, okay, well, that explains a lot.
Yeah. Did you get the bipolar?
Honestly, my first thought was, well, that does explain a lot.
Right, that connects some things. Did you get that diagnosis while you were in lockup?
No, yeah. But then I more thorough, conversations and diagnoses once I was in treatment and stabilized. Because, part of the problem in the lockup was that I was still basically kind of coming out of, I was going through withdrawal. Like, I wasn't well for a lot of reasons. Right. So I sort of stabilized in treatment. I was in treatment for 4 months.
Wow.
Highly recommended if you can afford it.
If the insurance gods grant you the power.
The insurance gods grant you the power. You and I talked about we might have to do a sidebar on insurance coverage.
Yeah.
And for people with co-occurring disorders, often suggested they do long-term inpatient treatment, and I was lucky enough to be able to do that. Which actually, insurance did not cover the long-term part. I have my father to thank for being able to do it. He was really amazingly. He's my dad, so of course he did it. But on the other hand,
yeah, you were very fortunate.
Very fortunate. But it was the sense I really, really did have, like, oh, that really does connect the dots on some things. Like, I'm a very specific kind of weird.
Yes.
Like, it's not just amorphously weird.
You're listening to With Friends Like These with Anna Marie Cox.
Buying tickets to sports and concerts can be complicated, but there is a better, simpler way with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to live events. With SeatGeek's seamless mobile experience, you can buy and sell tickets in just 2 taps. SeatGeek helps you find the best seats at the best prices, guaranteed. There is nothing quite like seeing your favorite team or musician in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone, and it is by far the easiest way I've found to buy concert tickets. I actually, I bought tickets to see Coldplay, which don't tell anyone because it's not my favorite band. It's my husband's favorite. Well, I won't say it's his favorite band. That would embarrass him, but he likes Coldplay. I put it down to our age difference, basically. But anyway, they're coming to town, and I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be able to find tickets, but I could. I did. I found tickets. I found tickets at lots of different prices. I had to do a little bit of calculation about how much do I want to see this band versus how much does my husband want to see this band, and how much would he be willing to spend to see my favorite band, which is not his favorite band. Anyway, I'll let you know how that turns out. But we got the tickets, and it was super, super, super easy. It is designed to make your ticket buying experience easy. So it does that. It saves you time and money by searching for multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find amazing deals. To get the most bang for your buck, SeatGeek grades every ticket based on value to help you immediately identify the best seats that fit your budget. Plus, every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. Make SeatGeek your go-to app for finding the best deals on every type of ticket, from sports and concerts to comedy and theater. Best of all, my listeners get $20 off their first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code FRIENDS today. That's promo code FRIENDS for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Do it for someone you love. There's some stuff that I did that I couldn't explain to myself, like behaviors, mainly having to do with like kind of the more mania stuff, like when I would like take everything out of my closet and stay up for 2 days, like organizing it, or like I would like develop these grand plans for books and order 1,000 things off Amazon and, then get depressed and just look at the boxes,
But you were an achiever too. Mm-hmm. Like this, I talked with Peter Sagal from Wait, Wait about this. Wait, Don't Tell Me. And he talked about, he got into a great college and he wrote plays that got produced, and like he was sort of on the run from his mental illness. If he just kept achieving, then see, everything's fine, clearly. And you've had a really interesting and varied and successful career.
Yeah, although of course in the inside, it's always not successful enough. Never successful enough.
Yes.
Ever enough.
Because I've gone through something similar where once I got a national radio show, I'm like, oh my God, now my problems will be solved. Oh wait, that's not going to fill the hole that's inside.
Not going to fill the hole inside. And also, I think this is common for people with all the different things that we have, which is that if I can do it, then it must be dumb. Like
right.
If I can do it, it's not that hard, and my achievements are worthless,
or I'm a fraud who will soon be exposed.
Or a fraud who, so everything I ever did that was like a big deal, I'd be like, oh, well, I guess it's not a big deal. I thought that would be a big deal, but it's not, because I could do it. So that means any idiot could. So on to the next thing that I think is hard, and then if I achieve it, then, oh, well, I guess, yeah, that turned out to be like not really important either.
Right.
So, I was like, I also come from an alcoholic family, and that's a very like adult child of alcoholic kind of thing too. Like trying to fill the hole with accomplishments and achievements.
Look at me.
And also, you don't have to worry about me.
Right.
I am good.
Yes.
I am good. You don't have to worry about
you.
you. I'm not a burden to you.
Yeah.
Which I think is, I imagine there's for your brother, some of that.
I think so. I think, and we have alcoholism in our family as well. And, for me, like I took to theater at a very early age. And I was telling somebody the other day, I've never been a good enough actor to make it big as an actor, but I've been a good enough actor to get through a lot of situations. I'm just good enough for that. Probably can't play Hamlet, but I can get out of a party once in a while.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think like my brother dealt with the chronic dormant mental illness in our family and the substance abuse issues, and I'm sure he was predisposed to a lot of that. And from a very early age, he started smoking pot, and that led to a bunch of other things, and most of which I don't know about, but I know there were DUIs, and I know there was problem gambling in his life, and I think he was, I mean, to use the term a lot of people use, self-medicating. He was trying to make that pain go away.
I think it works till it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Like that's another sort of
Right.
saying, but it does work for a while. Like the
Yeah.
achieving works for a while,
Yeah.
but eventually the more things you try to use to fill that emptiness, the emptiness just gets bigger.
Right.
Like the emptiness stretches, out the more you put in it, unless you address the emptiness itself. And I think, not to just abuse our metaphors, but I think what happens in recovery for either addiction or mental illness is you do address the void. Mm-hmm. Like you're just like, you know what, that's there.
Yeah.
And it's something I'm going to have to work on, but I can't just stuff it with other things or
Right.
pretend it doesn't exist.
Right.
I just have to be okay with like
Naming it.
naming it and not being okay. Like I have to be okay with not being okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In a weird way, that's how you start to get better.
Well, it's the elephant in the room. You're saying, look, this is a thing that exists. And I, we started our podcast about depression, and I thought, oh, this will be kind of a fun little thing. I got to talk to some of my friends, and
You actually probably did have that thought, didn't you? It'll be fun.
it'll be fun. And well, I mean, I did sort of look at what was on what was in my mental pantry that I had available to work with, and I'm like, well, I know a lot of comedians, and I'm depressed. Let's see if we can make a pie out of that.
It's like the podcasts are like the omelet of media.
Yeah, just throw it all in the pan.
Just like, what do I have?
Yeah,
some leftovers.
I'll just stir that up, a little olive oil.
Yeah.
And people have really responded to it, I think, because, and it astonishes me how much people respond to open conversation about this, because I'm kind of used to being a semi-public figure, and I know you are too. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess a lot of people don't talk about these things.
Yeah, and I'm always. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we decided to talk about this, for a podcast and put it out.
Yeah.
Is because I do think it helps people, because there isn't enough conversation about these issues, especially around suicide. There are 41,000 suicides every year.
And we're at like a 30-year high on it.
Yeah. And drug and alcohol-related suicides are up 50% in the last 10 years. A third of all suicides, I think, have some kind of, alcohol or drugs involved.
And they're pointing to a widening economic disparity as a huge contributing factor right now, too.
Yeah.
And then you got all
It's
the
a
military.
great
of course.
idea to take away some health care. That's what you want to do. What you want to do at a moment like this is take away people's access to mental health care. But while we still have it, I think if we start to try and address the prevention part of it, the prevention part of it does mostly lie with the person who's suffering, And what I would hope that people get out of my talking about it is to go ahead and tell people, tell a doctor, tell a therapist, tell a teacher,
tell a spouse
tell
for
a
the first time
spouse.
sometimes.
Because one of the things that I feel like I can laugh about now, but I thought everybody thought about suicide. I thought that was normal. I thought, and I know it seems ridiculous.
You had the ideation for a long time.
Years,
Yeah.
years and years. I hope my dad doesn't get upset listening to this, but going back to like probably even earlier than junior high, not active, which is another reason why I thought it was sort of normal. Because I wasn't like taking steps, I wasn't making a plan. It was more like just this passing thought of like, oh, that's an option.
Yeah.
That is an option that I have. And I just assumed everyone else, like when they were going through the ways they had to deal with life, like that's always option E, like you can do this A, B, C, D, or E.
Yeah.
Kill yourself. All right. No, not this time.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of people never consider E. I always think it's like you're on a freeway and suicide is the off ramp, but nobody else realizes. Everybody else thinks they're on like some kind of expressway where there's no off ramp, and you're like, "Don't you see what? It just went by."
Yeah, you could do that. And I was constantly making the choice to not do it.
Yeah.
And because I was making the choice not to, I never thought about the fact that I had it in my mind at all, and I never talked about it to anyone. One of the most helpful things I did in treatment was my counselor had me keep track of times I thought about self-harm.
Wow.
And it turns out it was like it was multiple times a day. And she was like, and Anna, it's not normal. It's not. It's okay. It's okay that it's not normal.
Yeah.
But it's not. And you deserve to have someone help you with this.
Yeah.
Which is a huge leap to make. The first leap is like to share it all. And then the second leap is like, oh, but I also get help for this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Right. It's not normal and it's addressable.
I remember, very first time I was clinically depressed, which I was diagnosed as a depressive before bipolar. It's, I think, somewhat normal to get, not for people to miss the manic part of bipolar 2. But
yeah, but with bipolar 2, it's kind of an umbrella diagnosis where depression is part of it. Yeah.
But I remember when I was first diagnosed with depression, I didn't want to take the antidepressants because I thought it was cheating. It was like, I don't deserve to take this antidepressants because then I'll just feel better. I won't have done the work.
Man, ear infections never do this. Like, depression is so insidious. It's like it's destroying all your ability to fight it. You never get this from strep throat.
Yeah, I didn't
strep
deserve.
throat isn't a jerk like that.
Strep throat never makes you think like, oh, you didn't earn that antibiotic.
Right. You deserve an infection.
You just have to suffer through this infection until you get better by yourself. God. And that's the way and although I did take antidepressants, I still kept drinking, which so it didn't really help. They weren't able to do their job. And I still carried with me that kind of attitude of like, I need to be able to fix this myself. Like, I don't deserve help for this. And I also really would like people to understand that suicidal ideation is not normal, and you get to talk to people about it. And also attempts, no matter how quote unquote unserious they may seem, are fucking serious.
Yeah.
And you deserve help for them too. And there's I think I felt, and I somehow got the message that like my first attempt, since it wasn't really serious, I kind of felt bad. I felt like I was being like a drama queen.
Well, and people use that term, oh, that's just a cry for help.
That's just a cry. Well, it's a cry for help.
It's a cry for help. It's like if someone's out there in the ocean drowning and they're crying for help.
Yeah.
You don't say, oh, well, just get over it.
Yeah.
Pull yourself
The water's
together.
not that deep.
Come on.
Like, if someone's in the, so let's say, it's the swimming metaphor, right? If someone drowning, if in the water's only 10 feet deep, you're not like, water's only 10 feet deep. Like,
I can swim out of that. Why can't you?
Like, yeah, you can't touch the ground. You still could drown, but it's all, it's not like you're in the ocean. It's not like you're really in the ocean. Like, call us when you're in the ocean.
Right.
Well, then we'll save you.
I remember when I worked at Amazon.com before I got into radio, and it was a very, I think they're all intense times at Amazon. There was that New York Times article a while ago about, they discovered all these people from Amazon cried at their desks. And I'm like, yeah, that's what you get in the morning, you check your meetings, you check your email, you cry, then you fire something up.
It's like the 2-minute hate. There's like the 2-minute cry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was working on some project with a really crazy deadline, and I remember driving into work like, wouldn't it be great if I just killed myself? Oh, well, I guess I better get to work. And I think it was so sudden and such a strange thought. I'm like, okay, I can recognize that as an intrusive thought. Like, that is not a legitimate option that I can do. But how strange that the wiring in my brain, which I did not set up, it goes to that place.
Yeah, and there's just some of us it does, and it does take, and it takes some work to stop thinking like that.
Yeah.
But now I don't think like that, and every once in a while I have to take a step back and be like, wow. Like
Yeah.
that's not on my radar anymore.
That's got to feel good.
It doesn't feel like anything unless I recognize it,
Uh-huh.
right? It just feels like, oh, this is what it is like to not think that way. You don't think about it until you think about it.
Right. Because it's the new normal.
It's the new normal. But it does take constant work. I continue to try and heal myself. There's no pill. I do take lots of different pills, all prescribed, and none of them, they're good. The good kinds of pills. They not mood altering. That's what they say. That's the difference between, Xanax and Wellbutrin.
Right.
But there is recovery work to be done in mental illness that is in a parallel way to addiction, where, I still do daily affirmations, which still feel idiotic. Like the very first time I ever was asked to look in the mirror and tell myself that I liked myself, felt like a fucking idiot.
Yeah. My therapist has me mentally go to my happy place. And I'm like, oh, come on. But it kind of helps.
It helps. I know. Well, I remember telling my counselor in treatment, like, I feel so dumb. Like, I cannot do this. I cannot stand in front of a mirror and tell myself, like, awesome things about myself. And she was like, okay, what did you do when you were drunk? Were you, could you, like, how does that, did you do some stuff that was stupid then? And I was like, okay, well, good point taken.
Touche.
And then she said, and I said, well, I also don't think it's going to work. I just don't believe this is going to work. Like, I'm too smart for it to work, right? I know the truth about myself, which is that I'm a horrible person. So I won't believe this bullshit from myself that I'm not. Right. And she said, well, I understand you think that positive affirmations, positive self-talk won't work. How did the negative self-talk work? Did that have an effect?
How's that working out for you? Yeah.
And I was like, again, touche.
Trained therapist.
You are earning your keep. And because the negative self-talk, I think we can all recognize this. Negative self-talk totally works.
Oh, yeah. It's awesome. That's why so many people love it.
Yeah, it is effective. And so, I do positive self-talk. Like, I have a spiritual, practice. I try to do meditation. Like a lot of people, it's in American way of life, it's hard to fit in.
Yeah.
I have a therapist. I see a psychiatrist every 3 months to check in on meds. So it's not like it just goes away and I'm better. So I never, in a very good way, I think, I never forget that I'm on this journey.
Yeah.
Of getting better. Like there's always it's not going to end.
It's funny how the ridiculous stuff works really well. I mean, I guess there's a reason why it became a cliche, is because it became so present. I mean, I was talking about with my brother, I wrote this book where I talked about, the circumstances with which some people kill themselves at a gun range. And then a few months later, he did that exact thing. And I was like, well, I gave him the idea, the blood's on my hands. Or when he was calling me over the years and I got the sense that he was just trying to hit me up for money, I wouldn't return his calls. And if I had, he'd be alive. And I've got, I went through therapy and I went through all these things in therapy talking about that. And I would say, well, isn't it a little convenient to say that I'm not responsible? Doesn't that get me off the hook a little bit too easy? Isn't that a plot device?
I don't deserve to get better.
Yeah. And I had a therapist who said, isn't it a little convenient to say that you are responsible?
Yeah.
But what it really took, because I could understand intellectually every drop of not being responsible. I got it. And I got the reasoning, I got the research, fine. But I couldn't in my heart do it. Mm-hmm. And I did EMDR. Have you ever heard of this?
Yeah.
Where you have these little electrical buzzers in your hand.
Suspiciously like Scientology.
It sounds like the dumbest thing in the world. Yeah. And but by these little brain retraining things and concentrating on the very devastating but truthful sentence, Rick shot himself. Those 3 words. it's a devastating thing to hear about your hero, your big brother who taught you how to drive. But it really has pushed me towards a truth that I can then work to maintain. But it came with hand buzzers.
Like cans, right? They're like sort of like the Scientology cans.
Exactly. Yeah. I know. I was waiting for the therapist to want me to sign up for $10,000 in extra classes or send me off to Sea Org, but that didn't happen.
And it's been recommended to me. I haven't. I've been able to muddle forward without it. But yeah, apparently, especially highly traumatic events, it's been suggested to me to deal with, some of the other traumas in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And our brains are so weird.
Yeah.
Like, they're just
goo, and nobody really knows how they work.
Like antidepressants, no one's really sure like exactly how they work. No one's really sure how addiction works.
Yeah. There's indication that depression might be related to swelling. Like there might be some swelling in there.
Yeah, sure.
Why not? It's all goo. Why shouldn't it swell?
I like the theory that a lot of mental disorders are sort of like OCD.
Mm-hmm.
That's why like Wellbutrin is used to treat a bunch of different stuff.
The compulsiveness,
because it's a lot of it's compulsion, right?
Yeah.
And I do think of like my suicide ideation was a compulsion.
Yeah.
Like was something like it was it turned into this thought that was just present.
Right. Just routes right back to that place.
Yeah. And like, I don't even want to say out loud like the negative self-talk that I had, but I had a very distinct litany. I'm okay. See, I'm going to tear up. Like, I'm a bad person.
That's why we put Kleenex in the studio.
Like I had this tape in my head that's like, I'm a bad person. I don't deserve anything. I'm a bad person. I don't deserve this. I'm a bad person. And it would just,
loop.
I'm a bad person. I want to die. I'm a bad person. I want to die. I'm a bad person. I want to die. And it was like a tape loop. I tried to, another thing, like I can't make my words match my brain. I would try to describe it to people, and because it feels like a tape loop somehow in your head. Like I have this image of like of the reel to reel, like running behind my eyes, and it would be intrusive and would not go away, and would occur to me at the weirdest times, and eventually it was inescapable.
Mm-hmm. Was it comforting in a way?
I do think so.
Yeah,
I do think that
because must be a reason you kept going back to it.
I think in some ways that is what compulsiveness teaches you.
It's a catechism.
Is it teaches you to be comfortable with those things. You develop an addiction to it. Mm-hmm. And when it goes away, like you have to learn other ways to think.
Yeah. And you have to learn a new reality to ground yourself in, because that one is familiar but toxic.
Yeah. And I've said to people 1,000 times, like, for me, cutting out the drugs and alcohol was relatively easy. Like, I happened to luck out kind of just physiologically. Uh-huh. I didn't have a terrible time. I wasn't addicted to opiates, number one. Those are physically pretty tough to kick, just the physiology of it.
Yeah.
Alcohol can be bad too. Benzos can be bad too. But actually, some people say they're worse. But I just, whatever combination of things happened, I got out of it okay. Mm-hmm. And I also was lucky in not dealing with cravings very much, because I think that's because I had such just a not violent, but like a low physical bottom. Mm-hmm. I don't know, whatever. Like, my point is that the addiction to negative self-talk was so much harder to break. The addiction to hating myself. Oh. Like that's the thing. That's the addiction that props up the most frequently in my life today. Yeah. Is when times are bad, what do I reach for? I reach for the bottle of self-hatred.
Yeah. Because those chemicals haven't leached out of your system like the alcohol did.
And that self-hatred and self, abuse, like that is just, it's poison. Like alcohol and drugs are poison, but it is right there at my fingertips. It is right there for me if I want it. And it's the hardest thing to put down.
Yeah.
You're listening to With Friends Like These with Anna Marie Cox.
Sending flowers has always been the best way to show someone you care. But if you're the one doing the sending, it isn't always easy or satisfying. You are lured in with that $19.99 advertised price, but when you check out, it is $94. What happened? There are hidden fees that leave you with a big bill, an even bigger disappointment when the flowers show up looking different than the pictures and they only last a few days. Bouqs.com is a better way to buy flowers. The Bouqs company offers fully transparent pricing, an easy, affordable shopping experience, and an incredible curated selection of flowers starting at $40, including free delivery. But that's a transparent price, $40 with free delivery. There's no those fees and shipping and what do you want to do with this and what do you want to do with that and the upselling. They don't do that. Transparent pricing. Each bouquet is sustainably farmed too, and it comes straight from the grower to the customer, meaning your flowers last longer and cost less to buy. Their farm fresh flowers are cut fresh and sourced from sustainable, eco-friendly farms. Your flowers last so long, your money goes a long way. In fact, I got some bouquets, and they came while we were traveling, and I came back and they were still there. It was so actually nice to come home to. The cat sitter got to enjoy them before we did, but we enjoyed them for a good long time as well. This year, show every mom in your life you care with flowers from the Bouqs company. And there is a special offer for my listeners. Order now and get 20% off. Hurry, the flowers will sell out, so don't wait. Just visit Bouqs.com and enter code FRIENDS for 20% off your Mother's Day purchase. Again, that's Bouqs, BOUQS.com, code FRIENDS at checkout. And dudes, you could be a better husband or boyfriend or brother or son with a Never Forget subscription, a regular reminder and delivery for those occasions that tend to slip the male mind. Dates like birthdays and anniversaries. Visit Bouqs.com and enter FRIENDS for 20% off your Mother's Day purchase. That's Bouqs.com, BOUQS.com, code FRIENDS at checkout.
Let me ask you this: How do you feel about, we're in a comfortable studio right now. There's a friendly engineer on the other side of the glass. It's a sunny day. This is all going to go out into the world. How are you feeling about that?
Nervous. I do believe that everything happens for a reason. I believe the confluence of events and conversations that brought us to this very moment didn't feel forced. Mm-hmm. Everything kind of just sort of happened to line up. Mm-hmm. And I also feel really strongly that there are people out there who may, after listening to this, call someone.
Yep.
And that's all it takes. I mean, I don't say that it takes because these are diseases that are pernicious, and you're going to need more help than a call.
But a call is huge.
A call is huge, and a call is the first step on a long journey. And just to tell someone, like, this is what I am dealing with right now, mm-hmm. It is serious, and you deserve help. Mm-hmm. It is serious. If you are thinking about hurting yourself, I had this weird thing where I would be like, well, I don't deserve help because I'm not really serious about it, or I don't deserve help because I should be able to deal with, or I don't deserve help because I don't want to be a drama queen. You deserve help. You deserve it, yeah. Period. You're a human being. If you are hurting, if you are in pain.
There aren't circumstances in which you don't deserve it.
Exactly. There are none. Right. No matter why it is you think, whatever it is you think that you did to deserve this pain, you don't deserve it, and you can have help, and it is there for you. Yeah. And there is help.
There is help. It takes some detective work sometimes, mm-hmm. and it takes a lot of effort, and our healthcare system has a lot of problems, and likely will for a while. Yeah. But there is help, and I think if people can channel the persistence of this shit that they've been dealing with into a persistence to get better, and to find that help, I think that can go a long way. I mean, when I was saying goodbye to my brother, when my brother turned into a pile of ashes, after he died, and my sister, my older sister, was carrying the box with his ashes down to the boat where we were going to go out on Puget Sound and scatter his ashes. And my mom said, "Is the box heavy?" And my sister said, "Well, he ain't heavy." Because I believe that comedy and grief can coexist. But I remember thinking, well, okay, what do we have? You know, we all have to fight this with what we have. I could not go through medical school. My brain doesn't work that way. There's a lot of things I can't do. I can get to a microphone and I can write some things down. I got those skills. I got some friends who are good at talking. And, I got some costumes. We got an old barn. Let's put on a show. and I think we all just have to do what we can. And I've been, I figure too, I've been carrying around this shit for so long that why not turn it against itself? Why not take all this experience that we've had dealing with this and channel it the other way, into trying to help people. And maybe if someone's listening to this, maybe you don't have access to a radio studio and some good recording equipment, but maybe you have access to a phone, or maybe you have access to checking in on somebody that you're worried about, and just finding out what's going on. And that's all any of us can do.
The checking in part, I think, is key. And I want to distinguish between checking in and feeling responsible for.
Yes.
You are not responsible for people's actions.
Right.
But when you're in that place of feeling undeserving and lonely and guilty, reaching out is an action that defies that.
Yeah.
It is the Petronius to the depression.
It's a slap in the face of the disease.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Because the disease wants you to be alone and suffer.
Right. So to reach out to someone, you are actually combating the disease.
Yeah.
You are. To reach out to someone and to say that they're worth it. And also, I don't want to turn too much into tips, but to take someone out for coffee, or to go to visit someone who's depressed, to let them know they don't have to do anything to deserve your attention and affection.
Right.
They can just, because what I would be is, I don't want to go to coffee. I don't want to see you. I don't want to do anything. And, a friend that would say, why don't we just watch Bachelor for 5 hours,
Yeah, I'll bring the ice cream.
I'll bring the ice cream. That's still tempting.
Yeah.
It's still totally into it.
Yeah.
That it also helps. That is an action too. Because it's the care and concern. You don't have to say the right thing. In fact, talking sometimes, I'm not going to say it makes it worse, but it's not the point.
Right.
The
you're not going to get to the bottom of it.
You're not going to help. You're not going to solve it, but to just be there, to show with an action that you care about someone and that they deserve help, is that's the healing. That's the help that you can really give someone. I also actually, now that I think about it, I'm going to cry again. I had a friend who would just call me and just get on the phone with me. And we didn't, it sounds really strange, but we would watch TV and not talk.
You'd watch the same show?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to feel someone's presence.
Yeah.
Reaching out to me. Again, you are slapping the disease in the face.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a human connection, if you can make one.
Yeah.
And you're not going to find it on your couch. You've got to get out of the house sometimes and try to do it. But
however you heal, you're not going to do it by yourself. That's the that's the nasty truth, because your disease would like you to think that you're going to have to do everything by yourself.
Yeah. We've been talking on I've been interviewing some of our listeners about the weirdest thing that they've done that actually helps
Oh, cool.
to address their depression. One person plays a ukulele, another listens to Disney podcasts. Do you have anything like that is an unexpected aid?
Well, I think that tasks that can be absorbing are weirdly useful.
Yes.
They're kind of like a meditation, and along those lines,
I've become hooked on crossword puzzles.
I love crossword puzzles. Those are great. I also knit and crochet. But
Yep.
the weirdest thing, but those are fairly common, but I would say like to volunteer, the weirdest part of those habits that I enjoy that help is undoing knots.
Really?
I've discovered this is actually a little bit of a thing.
There's a community, I bet.
I bet there is. I actually haven't discovered the community, but I've found other people that share this. Like, so, when you have a lot of yarn and string and whatever, like it will get knotted unless you're totally like completely organized about it. And I'm not, you know, and so, but there's a part of me that when I see a really nasty knot, like on my yarn's
You get
gotten
a little
confused,
excited.
I get a little, I'm like, oh, that's going to be a tough one. Like, that's going to be a tough one to undo. Woohoo. I actually read, I think the way that I know, now I'm remembering why I know this isn't that weird, or it may be weird, but it's not completely unique to me, is there's a Joe Hill novel where the protagonist, who is also an addict, likes to undo knots.
Wow.
So I don't remember how she gets the knots. Like, that's the thing that is like, I would be, if there's like a, Reddit /
Yeah, you've got to find a friend who loves tying complicated
I know.
knots.
I mean, there must be I wonder, people who are really into this, like fetish, I wonder like there's somebody that sells knots for like really the best knots. Like someone in Japan.
Somebody listening to this is emailing us right now. They just hit send.
Where you get your knots. Knots.com.
Right.
There's probably, just monetize anything, I guess. So.
Knots Query Farm.
Yeah. Yes, it's a bonus of being into yarn. It's knots.
Knots.
Yeah.
All right.
Do we have anything we want to talk about before we sign off? We've created a lot of content.
We have made content. We've made highly clickable content. The only thing that I want to do, that I want to make sure we get to, is in the spirit of talking about getting help, and I'm vamping a little bit here, is that one of my favorite things that Google does is if you type in the word suicide, the first thing you get, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. It's confidential. It's free in the United States.
Also, there is the crisis text line, which now I'm going to have to do my Google.
Okay.
Because I know that it exists. We didn't get to talk about the politics of some of the stuff. We might have to do that on another show.
Yeah.
Because as we're doing this, I'm reminded that if we lose the ban on discriminating against pre-existing conditions, doing things like talking about your mental illness could be used as evidence of having a pre-existing condition. Mm-hmm. So
you're on the record, and an insurance company would be able to point to that.
Yep. So let's just not do that.
Yeah.
So I will go ahead and say, if you have an interest in this, you might call your representative.
Insurance companies, please plug your ears.
Yes. Crisis text hotline, how it works. They're on Twitter, crisis text line.
Great.
And that's a whole nother show. There's been all these improvements in how people reach out to those who are struggling online. There's a lot of people who are thinking about how to do that. But if you're out there and you're struggling, you can also be the one to reach out yourself. It's an amazing thing to do.
And even though you are alone, you're not alone.
I mean this in the least creepy way.
You're not as weird as you
problem.
think you are.
I don't mean this in the creepy way, but you're not alone. Like,
help is coming from inside the house.
That's a good one. Yeah, help is coming from inside the house.
Help is in the back seat of the car with a hook. Well, Anna Marie Cox.
John Moe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
But I really loved being here.
Yeah.
And we'll do this again sometime.
Fight the power.
Well, thanks for making it this far in the show. It's more appreciated than usual. And because John and I kind of muffed up our redirects to helplines, I thought I'd repeat them here. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-TALK. Again, that's 1-800-273-TALK 8255. And the crisis text line is available on Twitter, and it is also available via text. If you text HOME, that's HOME, to 741-741 from anywhere in the U.S. at any time, you will receive a text back from a live trained crisis counselor, and they will talk you through whatever it is you're going through. And I want to emphasize here, I used to think, you know what, this isn't that important. This isn't an emergency. I'm not in real trouble right now. You know what? If it feels like an emergency to you, that's enough. If it feels bad to you, that's enough. You can reach out for help with that. And by reaching out for help, you are developing skills that will help you do it again in the future, and maybe do it when it is a little more urgent. Sometimes we have to practice reaching out for help. And speaking of reaching out for help, allow me to direct you to the other podcasts in the Crooked Media family, which I'm sure you already subscribe to, but if you don't, Love It or Leave It, which, hell, I'm going to need Love It or Leave It this week for sure. And DeRay McKesson's new podcast, Pod Save Us All, Tommy Vitor's Pod Save the World, and of course, the granddaddy of us all, Pod Save America. We are all part of the Crooked Media family, and we love to have you listen to all of us. We're a little competitive about it, but I think for the most part, we wish each other well. And if you have anything you want to get in touch with me about, you can tweet at the podcast at crooked_friends. You can also email the podcast. The email address is withfriendslikepod@gmail.com. Again, that's withfriendslikepod@gmail.com. You can follow me online at Anna Marie Cox. John Moe is at John Moe. And you know what? Again, just thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for listening. You are worth every bit of the help that you get. So don't worry. Reach out for help if you need it. It is the first thing you do on the road to getting better. And I will see you along the way.